Hey guys, tonight you find yourself standing beneath the low arch of a medieval town gate, with cold stone at your shoulder, damp straw clinging to your boots, smoke caught in the rafters of the guardhouse, and distant bells trembling somewhere beyond the river mist. Torchlight leans and shivers along the wall. Horse breath blooms white in the winter air, and the mud has opinions about keeping your feet. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. Assuming the brochures were damp monks pointing vaguely at a road and saying, "It is probably safe. You pull your cloak tighter, because you probably would not last a week out here without luck. Thick wool, and someone generous with pottage." So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there, whether midnight, dawn, or some small quiet hour when the world feels half asleep. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The gate creaks behind you, slow and reluctant, as if the old oak door dislikes admitting another traveller so near dusk. Iron studs glimmer in the torchlight, slick with mist. Above, a sleepy guard leans from the wall-walk in a fur-lined hood, watching you with the solemn suspicion reserved for strangers, tax collectors, and geese with bad intentions. His halberd rests beside him, more symbol than threat for the moment, and he calls down to ask your business. You answer with the careful humility of someone who would rather not sleep in a ditch. A penny toll is taken at the gate, though the toll-keeper bites it once, as if the coin might confess to being false. Some swear that a bent coin brings a crooked journey, and the toll-keeper, who has seen too many crooked journeys already, spits politely into the mud for luck. You do not know whether this helps, but no one nearby looks surprised, and in a medieval town that is nearly the same as proof. Inside, the street narrows into a ribbon of churned earth between leaning houses, their upper floors bending toward one another like old neighbours sharing rumours. Wattle walls are patched with clay. Shutters are closing. A woman shakes, rushes from a doorway, scattering old herbs and floor sweepings into the gutter, where rainwater carries them downhill with onion skins, straw, and the faint memory of yesterday's fish. A boy, old enough to work but still small in the shoulders, drags a bundle of firewood past a pig that seems offended by everything. No children linger long. The cold pushes everyone inward. You trudge carefully, feeling the mud tug at each step. Somewhere nearby, a smith strikes one last tired note from an anvil. Somewhere else, an alewife lowers a shutter and calls to a neighbour about the price of oats. The air smells of wet wool, wood smoke, horse leather, and the dark river beyond the walls. From the church tower comes a bell, soft at first, then fuller, counting the evening office. The sound spreads over rooftops and settles into the lanes, telling bodies what the hour is. Because most bodies here do not own clocks and would not trust one if it were dropped in their lap by an angel. You pass a small shrine set into a wall, with a painted saint whose face has faded into a patient blur. Wax has dripped in pale lumps below it. A pilgrim badge, dull pewter and bent at one edge, hangs from a nail beside a ribbon left by someone asking for safe travel. Strong suns, healed joints, or perhaps all three, for medieval prayers often travel in bundles. You touch 2 fingers to your brow, not from certainty, but from habit borrowed quickly from those around you, even now. It is hard to tell whether comfort comes from belief, custom, or simply having something to do with cold hands. The inn stands near the market square, beneath a signboard painted with a red stag whose antlers resemble tree roots, lightning, or a badly remembered cabbage. It swings above the door in the wind. Light leaks around the shutters. You hear voices inside, softened by thick walls and smoke. Your stomach answers with embarrassing sincerity. It has been a long road, and the last thing you ate was coarse bread gone hard at the edges, softened only by dipping it into ale thin enough to make water feel ambitious. Before you reach the door, you notice a man standing under the eaves, half in shadow, half in fire glow. He is not rich, though his cloak was once good cloth. Its hem is stained from travel, and one sleeve has been mended with thread darker than the wool. A leather satchel hangs across his body, heavy enough to pull one shoulder lower than the other. He carries a staff marked with little knife cuts, perhaps for miles, perhaps for prayers, perhaps for debts no one wishes to count aloud. His beard is trimmed unevenly, as if done with a borrowed blade near bad light. Yet his eyes are sharp, not harsh, not hurried, but awake in the way of men who read by candles too long and listen when others only drink. At his belt hangs a small case for pens, and from one finger spreads a ghost of old ink, dark at the nail, a wandering scholar, then, or a clerk between employments, which is often a polite way of saying hungry. He looks toward you as the inn door opens and spills warmth onto the step. For a moment the two of you share the same gust of smoke, malt and roasted turnip. Then he inclines his head. "You have come by the south road," he says. You glance back at your boots, which are making an argument for his accuracy. "I have." Then you pass the ruined milestone. You remember it a leaning block half buried near the ditch, with letters too worn for most eyes. You had thought it a grave marker, then a boundary stone, then a convenient place for a crow to judge you. "I passed a stone," you say. The scholar smiles a little. Roman. The word rests oddly in the cold air. Roman. It carries weight, like a coin from a dead empire, like a wall built by hands no one can name, like a road still stubborn beneath the mud after kings and abbots have argued themselves into bones. You have heard of Rome in sermons, in tavern boasts, in travellers' tales where every ruin is either Caesar's palace or a giant's chair. No one can quite agree whether Rome was a warning, a marvel, a punishment, or simply what happens when men have too much stone and not enough humility. The scholar pats the satchel at his side. "I carry a copy of an old account," he says, "not old enough to be trusted entirely, not new enough to be dismissed. It speaks of the great arena in Rome, the Flavian amphitheatre, though many call it the Colosseum now, a place of tears and gates and numbered ways, where the crowd rose like a hillside of faces. A cart rattles past behind you, one wheel complaining in a rhythm that sounds close to doom but may only be poor carpentry. The horse pulling it lowers its head, steaming in the cold. A dog follows at the cart's rear, ribs hidden by shaggy fur, hopeful but pretending otherwise. The scholar watches it go, then returns his gaze to you, and it speaks, he continues, of the most dangerous seat. You almost laugh, though softly, because danger usually belongs to roads, fevers, childbirth, bad lords, wolves in winter, rotten bridges, or stew made by a cook with confidence but no evidence. A seat sounds harmless. A seat is where a tired person hopes the world will stop asking things of them. But the scholar does not smile now. The innkeeper's wife appears in the doorway and tells both of you that warmth costs money if you mean to occupy it. This is fair enough. Warmth, like mercy, rarely comes free in towns with walls. You step inside, ducking beneath the low beam blackened by years of smoke, and the scholar follows. Rushes lie scattered over the floor, mixed with sweet herbs to persuade the room it smells better than it does. Beeswax candles burn near the better table, while tallow dips smoke near the benches where humbler travellers sit. A pot of pottage murmurs over the hearth. Somewhere in the rafters, a hen mutters in her sleep, perhaps having strong opinions about empire. You find a place near the wall, close enough to the fire to thaw your fingers, far enough to avoid the innkeeper's direct accounting eye. The scholar sits across from you and eases the satchel into his lap as carefully as if it holds relics. Perhaps it does. In this world, a scrap of bone, a saint's tooth, a Roman coin, and a troublesome manuscript may all travel with equal dignity, depending on who is telling the story. He loosens the strap. The leather sighs. Inside, wrapped in linen, lies a small bundle of parchment leaves, the edges darkened by hands and smoke and damp years. He doesn't open it yet. First, he orders ale, bread, and a bowl to share. Medieval scholarship. Your learning begins with supper whenever possible. Around you, the town settles into night. Boots scrape, cloaks drip. A carter argues mildly about oats. A woman near the hearth ties a charm of red thread around her wrist and claims it keeps away winter fever. Some swear that red thread draws sickness out through the skin, though others say it only proves you own thread. The suspicious monk in the corner, if he is a monk, watches the scholar's satchel over the rim of his cup. His tonsure is hidden under a hood. But he has the air of a man prepared to disapprove professionally. The scholar notices him too, but says nothing. Instead, he leans closer, voice lowered until it is nearly part of the fire's crackle. You must understand, he says, that in Rome, a seat was never only a seat. Outside, the bell gives another slow note. The half-burned candle between you gutters, bends, and steadies. You warm your hands around a wooden cup, feeling the ale's small heat through the grain. Beyond the shutter, the river mist presses against the town. Behind your eyes, the south road still stretches dark and wet, passing the ruined milestone, the ditches, the fields, the old stones that may once have belonged to men who believed their world would last forever. The scholar finally opens the manuscript, and as the first cramped lines appear in the wavering candlelight, you settle deeper into your cloak, listening while the medieval night gathers close around you, and the forgotten roar of ancient Rome begins, very softly, beneath the rain. The scholar's finger moves over the first line as though waking a sleeping creature, and the candle flame gives the parchment a thin gold skin. For a while, you remain in the inn, with wet walls breathing smoke and the Red Stag sign knocking outside. But the tale begins to pull the room away. The scrape of benches becomes the shuffling of a crowd, and the murmur of ale drinkers becomes something wider, older, and less merciful. Then the suspicious monk rises from his corner. He does it slowly, with the gravity of a man who believes sudden movement may be vanity. His robe is brown, patched at both elbows, and his belt holds a knife, a rosary, and a little pouch that probably contains salt, flint, and a dried leaf against stomach trouble. Some swear fennel under the tongue keeps hunger quiet, though you suspect hunger is not fooled so easily. You should not read that here, he says. The scholar looks up. Brother Anselm. There are ears in taverns, the monk says, and ale makes them longer. This seems unfair to ale, but no one argues. The scholar folds the parchment shut. The innkeeper's wife crosses herself when she hears Rome mentioned, as if the old empire might still send taxmen through the chimney. No one can quite agree whether Rome was holy, wicked, or useful because its stones made excellent barn foundations. Brother Anselm tells you both to come to the monastery guest house, where travellers may sleep under a roof and manuscripts may be judged by those qualified to sigh at them. So you rise, take one last swallow of ale, and step back into the night. The rain has softened to mist. Rushlight glows behind shutter cracks. Your boots find the same mud they were trying to forget. The stray dog from the cart stands beneath the eaves, watching as though appointed by some small, hairy council. When you begin walking, it follows close enough to smell your bread. Brother Anselm leads you through quieter lanes, carrying a horn lantern whose shaved panels glow dull amber. At the monastery gate, an iron key turns in the lock, and the porter peers out from a wool blanket with the expression of a saint carved during a bad winter. He admits you after Brother Anselm murmurs a few words. The dog tries to enter as well. The porter says no. The dog sits in the rain and looks deeply betrayed. Inside the guest house, the air changes. It is still cold, but cleaner, touched with beeswax, damp wool, boiled leeks, old wood, and the faint mineral smell of stone. A narrow hearth burns low. Straw pallets line one wall. Fresh rushes wait in the corner to be scattered in the morning, because even holiness must occasionally address the floor. Brother Anselm sets the lantern down. Now, he says. The scholar unwraps the manuscript again, and this time the monk leans close, not to stop him, but to watch. You see cramped Latin and notes squeezed into the margin by another hand. The ink has browned with age. Some letters bloom where damp once found them. You imagine the scribes who copied such things bent backs, cold fingers, goose quills trimmed with small knives. A copyist in winter may warm ink by tucking the little horn bottle under his arm. Some swear it keeps the ink from sulking, though the ink still does as it pleases. The scholar begins translating softly, like someone easing a heavy door open. He tells you the arena was not merely a ring of stone where people gathered. It was a machine of order. Every arch, stair, passage, and seat taught the crowd where it belonged. The poor climbed high, where faces blurred under the sky. Citizens and tradesmen found their places. Women, unless rank or privilege bent the rule, were often placed far above the sand. Senators sat low. Priests and officials sat where they could be seen seeing. Rome, the scholar says, arranged even excitement by rank. You look around the guest house, the monk by the lantern, the scholar by the manuscript, you with travel mud drying on your hem. Medieval life has its ranks too. The lord at high table, the servants below the salt, the monk in choir by age and office, the peasant waiting at manor court with cap in hand. A seat is never only a seat. You begin to understand why the scholar said it so softly. He speaks of the Colosseum's lower places, close to the arena floor, where important men sat near the spectacle because nearness itself was a sign of power. To sit close meant you were protected, honoured, visible. It meant your name carried weight. Yet it also meant there was little distance between your body and whatever fear had been released below. Dust could rise into your mouth. Heat could strike your face. A beast might fling itself against a barrier. A weapon might fly badly. A crowd might surge in panic. Even a well-planned wall is still only stone between breath and danger. Brother Anselm touches the margin. Here, he says. The scholar bends closer. You do too, though the Latin remains mostly a forest of thorns to your eyes. Brother Anselm reads a note added by some earlier monk, who had apparently distrusted both Rome and adjectives. The note says, in its dry way, that those seated nearest the arena were nearest also to sudden death, and perhaps to pride, which the scribe considers the more reliable killer. You hear the rain on the roof, a coal shifts in the hearth. The half-burned candle from the inn gutters beside the manuscript. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the most dangerous seat was dangerous because of claws and iron, because of crowds and bad luck, or because the person sitting there believed himself too important to fear anything at all. The monk pours you watered ale, thin and sour but welcome. On the table lies coarse bread, a heel of cheese, and salted peas left for travellers. You eat quietly while the scholar's voice mingles with the rain. He describes the crowd as a living hillside, wool cloaks, white togas, bare heads, painted faces, wagers whispered, prayers muttered, curses swallowed. He speaks of awnings overhead, ropes managing shade, stairways pouring thousands in and out like grain from a sack, and under it all the lower seats wait, polished by privilege, close enough to the sand that danger does not need to shout. You pull your cloak around you on the straw pallet later, with the manuscript wrapped again, and Brother Anselm muttering a prayer against fire, theft, mice, and careless readers. Outside, the dog has somehow been admitted after all and now sleeps near the threshold, victorious without bragging. The monastery bell marks another hour. In the darkness, you smell beeswax and old ink, and you dream not of battle, but of stone seats descending toward a bright oval of sand where the safest people in Rome sit almost close enough to touch what they have come to watch. Morning comes without asking whether you're ready for it. The monastery bell begins in the dark, not loud at first, but patient, as though tapping at the edge of sleep with a wooden spoon. You wake on the straw pallet with your cloak twisted around one shoulder and your boots waiting beside you, stiff with dried mud. For a moment, you do not know where you are. Then the smell returns: beeswax, old smoke, damp wool, boiled leeks, and the faint sharpness of ink from the scholar's satchel. Rain has stopped. Somewhere in the guest house, Brother Anselm coughs in the manner of a man correcting the air. The dog at the threshold lifts its head before anyone else moves. It watches you with calm expectation, as if the two of you made a formal agreement in the night. No one can quite agree whether dogs follow travellers for affection, crumbs, or secret business of their own, but this one seems satisfied with all three. You step outside into a dawn the colour of pewter. The monastery yard lies under a skin of mist. Hens pick carefully near the bakehouse. A lay brother carries 2 buckets from the well, shoulders bent, breath steaming. In the kitchen doorway, a woman with red hands breaks yesterday's loaves into a wooden bowl, softening them with warm ale for the workers who will not see a proper meal until the sun stands high. Medieval mornings do not begin with leisure. They begin with someone cold, hungry, and already late. Brother Anselm gives you a strip of coarse bread, a little cheese wrapped in cloth, and a blessing that sounds slightly like a warning. He also presses a pinch of dried rue into the scholar's palm. Some swear rue keeps away bad air and ill fortune on the road. Others say it mostly keeps away people with delicate noses. The scholar thanks him gravely and tucks it into his pouch. Then, with the manuscript bound again in linen, you leave by the small eastern gate and take the pilgrim road. The road is not grand. It is a ribbon of mud and pale stones between hedges silvered with frost. Here and there, older paving shows through, squared and stubborn beneath the medieval ruts. The scholar taps one exposed stone with his staff. Roman, he says again. You smile into your cloak. By now you suspect he would identify a turnip as Roman if it looked weathered enough. but the road does feel ancient underfoot. It has the firmness of something made by men who expected obedience from hills, rivers, and future centuries. Behind you, the monastery bell fades. Ahead, fields open slowly. Peasants move in the dim light, carrying tools over their shoulders. A woman in a patched hood scatters grain for geese that follow her like offended officials. Smoke rises from low cottages. You pass a roadside cross hung with little scraps of cloth, each one a prayer, a thanks, or a bargain with heaven. A pilgrim badge glints on the cloak of an old man ahead of you, shaped like a scallop shell though the sea is far away. He walks with his head bowed, murmuring to himself or to a saint who may or may not be listening. The scholar begins where the manuscript left off. In Rome, he says, a place to sit could announce who you were before you opened your mouth. You step around a puddle glazed with thin ice. That sounds familiar. It should, he says. Look at any hall. The Lord sits high, the steward near him, guests by rank, servants move below. Even in church, men know where to stand, women know where custom places them, and every guild would notice if a tanner sat like a goldsmith. You think of the inn last night, better candles near the better table, smoky dips near the benches, warmth divided by purse. The world seems to arrange itself in layers, like a winter onion, each layer certain the one beneath smells worse. In the Colosseum, the scholar continues, rank became stone. The emperor had his place, senators had theirs, priests, magistrates, soldiers, citizens, foreigners, freedmen, women. The poor each body was sorted, guided, watched. A seat could be honour, it could be permission, it could be command. The dog trots ahead, nose low, then returns when it discovers the road contains nothing edible except possibly the road itself. Your boots make a steady wet sound. There is something soothing in the rhythm: step, staff, paw, breath, step, staff, paw, breath. The scholar's voice fits itself between them. He explains that the lowest seats near the arena were not given because they were safest, but because they were prestigious. Nearness made a person visible. A senator seated low could be seen by other senators, by the crowd, by the emperor. To be close to danger, while appearing untouched by it, was its own kind of performance. You imagine a man in clean white cloth sitting straight-backed while dust rises, while animals snarl below, while thousands roar above him. He must look calm, because everyone is watching. He must look honoured, because honour has placed him there. He must look fearless, because fear is expensive when pride is sitting beside you. Some swear that certain Romans carried little charms to the game's amulets against the evil eye, bits of engraved bone, knots, tiny phallic charms meant to laugh misfortune away. The scholar says this with the mild discomfort of a man translating pagan habits beside a road cross. You glance at the red thread charm tied around your own wrist by the alewife last night when you bought bread for the morning. You'd almost forgotten it. Perhaps people change their empires faster than their fears. The road climbs, frost thins under the first weak light. Your breath comes easier. At the hilltop you pause beside a broken milestone half swallowed by grass. Its letters are worn nearly smooth. But the scholar kneels as if greeting an elder. He brushes moss from the face of the stone with careful fingers. No one can quite agree whether this marked a distance to a town now gone, or was dragged here from elsewhere to mend a boundary, he says, but it remembers a road. You sit on a low bank and chew bread that fights back. The cheese is sharp, the air sharper. Below, the town you left is only a huddle of roofs and smoke. The monastery tower shows above the mist, its bell quiet for now. Beside you, the scholar unwraps a corner of the manuscript, not fully exposing it to the damp, only enough to check a line. A seat could also be punishment, he says. You look at him. Not always the seat of honour. Sometimes a body was placed where all could see it because shame needed witnesses. At feasts, at courts, at church doors, in markets, public place gives meaning. Rome understood that. So does every village that puts a thief in the stocks. You think of manor courts, of stools set before judges, of sinners made to stand barefoot at a church porch holding a candle, of gossip moving faster than carts. In this world, to be seen is rarely simple. It can raise you, expose you, judge you, or trap you. This same bench can comfort tired bones in the evening and hold a shamed man by morning, depending on who orders it. The scholar folds the manuscript again. So the dangerous seat, he says, may be the one closest to beasts, or closest to the emperor, or closest to the eyes of the crowd. Perhaps it is the place where honour and peril become the same thing. A cold breeze moves over the grass. The dog presses against your boot, pretending this is accidental. Down the road, the old pilgrim with the scallop badge has stopped at the cloth-hung cross. He touches the wood, bows, and continues. You rise too, shoulders easing beneath your cloak. The day brightens by a small degree, though the sun remains hidden behind cloud. Ahead, the pilgrim road bends toward a market town, where smoke thickens and the sound of carts begins to gather. Behind you, the broken Roman stone keeps its worn face turned toward the fields. You walk on, carrying breadcrumbs in your glove, mud on your boots, and the odd thought that a seat, like a road, can hold the weight of centuries without ever speaking aloud. By mid-morning the road gives itself to wheels. You hear the market town before you see it, oxen snorting in their yokes, cart axles groaning like old men asked to dance, women calling prices across the damp air, and somewhere beneath it all, a parish bell marking an hour that everyone already feels in their stomach. Frost has withdrawn into hedges and shaded ditches. Mud returns to its rightful throne. You enter by a timber bridge over a narrow stream, where the water slides brown beneath broken ice. A toll-keeper sits in a little booth beside the gate, wrapped in sheepskin, with a wax tablet on his knee and a knife for marking accounts. He asks where you have come from, what you carry, and whether the scholar's satchel contains anything that might produce a fee. The scholar answers with the weary patience of a man who has explained before that knowledge is rarely taxable unless bound in handsome leather. The toll-keeper squints at the manuscript bundle. Could be relics. Not holy enough, says the scholar. Could be charms. Too dull. Could be dangerous. The toll-keeper finally takes a small coin for entry, because uncertainty is also taxable when a man sits by a gate long enough. Some swear a clear-ringing toll coin promises an honest road, while a dull one means someone nearby is lying. This one vanishes into market noise, which feels very medieval and therefore suspicious. Inside the town, the square opens like a churned brown lake. Stalls lean beneath patched awnings. Smoke from braziers drifts low, carrying roasted onions, singed wool, hot iron, smoked fish, and damp straw. A woman sells coarse bread. A fishmonger praises eels like fallen noblemen, and a potter sets out wet clay bowls. A barber surgeon displays his basin and little blades, while beside him hangs a painted sign offering tooth-pulling, cupping, bleeding, and other mercies best approached with caution. You move slowly through the crowd, shoulder to shoulder with villains, pilgrims, drovers, apprentices, 2 nuns buying thread, and a man leading a goose by a string with the air of one who has lost a serious argument. The dog follows close at your heel, occasionally sniffing baskets in ways that will one day get it kicked. You break off a crumb of morning bread and drop it without looking. The dog accepts this tribute with holy silence. Near the church wall, relic sellers have spread their wares on cloths. Here are little crosses of bone, bronze rings said to cure cramps, pilgrim badges shaped like saints, and vials containing cloudy water from wells so famous that you suspect several wells have been promoted beyond their abilities. One seller holds up a splinter of wood and declares it came from Rome itself, from an ancient seat where a senator trembled during the games. Another claims a chipped red stone is from the Colosseum, though it looks very like the brick beside the town bakehouse. No one can quite agree whether relic sellers are holy helpers, clever thieves, or both in shifts. The scholar pauses. From the Colosseum, is it the seller straightens? As true as Lent is long, that is not a measurement I trust. The seller lowers his voice. It was taken from the place of dangerous seats. At this, several people turn. A wool merchant, broad-faced and red from the cold, laughs into his beard. Dangerous seats. A seat is dangerous only if made by my cousin's apprentice. I sat on one last Michaelmas, and nearly met St. Peter under the table. A spice peddler with a yellow hood shakes her head. You laugh. But Romans were mad for watching peril. They must have known risk. A pilgrim with a badge of St. James says, perhaps the rich sat close because they believed wolves loved rich men better. The scholar smiles faintly. Wolves love no one. You stand among them with the market pressing close, and for a moment the old Roman arena seems to rise out of the square's noise. The market has tiers of its own, the best stalls near the church steps, the louder sellers in the centre, the poor with baskets along the edges, beggars by the wall where generosity may pass slowly enough to be caught. Every person knows where to stand, how loudly to call, whom to flatter, whom to avoid. Even the goose knows, though it pretends otherwise. A toll collector from the wool stall joins the argument while counting folded cloth. He says Roman spectators surely understood danger, because anyone who has watched an ox bolt or a cartwheel split knows that crowds are thin-skinned creatures. A baker's wife disagrees. She says people sitting in honoured places often believe misfortune has manners. Some swear that noble blood runs warmer and therefore resist cold, sickness, and fear. She says this while wrapping her own cracked hands in linen, and her tone suggests noble blood may come knead dough if it feels so strong. The scholar listens, then says, in the arena there were barriers, walls, nets, guards, rules for entrance and exit. Rome did not trust chaos, so it dressed danger in architecture. The spice peddler sniffs. Dressed wolves still bite. This wins approval from the crowd. Even the dog seems to agree, though its expertise may be limited to bones. You ask the scholar whether those who sat close knew the risk. He looks toward the relic seller's red stone, then toward the church where wax candles flicker before painted saints. Some did, he says. Some perhaps forgot. Some may have enjoyed knowing. A danger seen from a safe distance can make a man feel larger than he is. A danger seen from too close reminds him of his actual size. The words settle gently. Nearby. A woman ties a sprig of rosemary to her child's sleeve to sharpen memory before a lesson with the parish clerk. Another customer rubs a bronze charm against his aching jaw before deciding the barber surgeon's tooth-pulling looks worse than the tooth. The market continues around you, ordinary and strange, full of bargains, prayers, hunger, and little hopes. The relic seller, not finished, offers you the Roman stone at a traveller's price. you decline with respect. The scholar says that if every stone sold as Colosseum stone had truly come from Rome, the arena would have vanished twice over by now. The seller shrugs, unhurt, then Rome was very large. You leave him to his certainty and cross toward the far side of the square. Clouds thicken above the rooftops. The church bell rings again, scattering pigeons from the tiles. Your red thread charm peeks from your sleeve. The dog noses at a dropped onion peel and regrets it. Behind you, the merchants continue arguing whether the Romans were brave, foolish, cruel, bored, or simply seated according to rules they did not dare question. Ahead, beneath a low sign swinging over a smoky doorway, warmth waits, and with it the scholar's tail moves closer to the seat itself, though for now you remain in the market's slow, muddy thunder, where every stall has its place and every place has its price. The alehouse receives you the way old buildings receive all travellers reluctantly at first, then all at once, with heat, smoke, and the smell of bodies packed close under a low roof. You duck beneath a beam polished by generations of foreheads and find yourself in a room where the air is thick enough to chew. Rushes cover the stone floor, though not recently enough to flatter anyone. Crushed mint and sweet flag have been scattered among them to sweeten the smell, and for a moment, if you breathe carefully and do not ask too much of the world, they almost succeed. The scholar chooses a bench near the hearth. The dog slides under it before anyone can object, curling around its own paws like a creature who has studied both hunger and opportunity. A woman with flour on her sleeves brings wooden cups of ale, a trencher of coarse bread, and a bowl of pottage heavy with barley, leeks, and a few reluctant peas. You eat slowly, letting the warmth settle through your fingers. Outside, the market still mutters, but in here the sound softens spoons scraping bowls. Logs collapsing in the hearth, low laughter, wet cloaks steaming on pegs. A man near the fire lifts his boot and shakes mud from the heel onto the rushes. The alewife gives him a look sharp enough to trim parchment. He lowers the boot at once. Even in a smoky alehouse, rank and law survive in small kingdoms. The scholar places the linen-wrapped manuscript on the table, but he does not open it. Instead, he rests both hands around his cup and gazes into the fire as if Rome might be seen among the coals. "We have circled the matter long enough," he says. "The seat most feared by some was the seat nearest the arena floor." You glance at the bench beneath you, suddenly aware of splinters, because it could break. Everything can break, he says. But no, because it was close. He lets the word settle. Close. Close to warmth. Close to honour. Close to a lord's ear. Close to a hearth on a cold day. Close is not always a warning, yet close to a cliff edge. Close to fever breath. Close to a horse's hoof. Close to a man with a knife after too much ale, then close becomes another sort of creature. The scholar tells you that the lowest places in the Colosseum were prized because they touched power. The people sitting there were not the forgotten crowd high in the stone heights, squinting down through sun and dust. They were the visible ones, the polished ones, the ones whose names mattered. Senators in pale garments, priests with old rites clinging to them, magistrates whose faces carried law, men who expected others to make room. And because Rome loved arrangement, these honoured watchers sat where the spectacle breathed upon them. You picture it as the scholar speaks not in a bright, restless way, but as a slow image forming in firelight. The arena sand lies below, pale and raked. Heat rises from it. Dust lifts whenever feet move across it. The lower seats curve around the oval, close enough that a man may smell animal musk, oil, sweat, and churned sand. Close enough that the sound below does not arrive as a distant roar but strikes the ribs. Close enough that when the crowd stirs behind, and the thing below stirs before, a seated man may discover that honour has very little padding. Some swear the great men of Rome sprinkled perfume on their clothing before attending, or held scented cloths near the face when the smells grew too strong. The scholar cannot say how often this happened, only that the wealthy have always searched for ways to improve air without improving the world that made it foul. You look around the alehouse, where damp wool, onions, smoke, ale, and dog have formed a committee. A scented cloth would not be unwelcome. It might even qualify as a miracle, though a small one, and likely expensive. An old carter at the next table hears the scholar's Roman talk and leans over. "Lowest seat is never safest," he says. "Ask anyone who sits nearest the door when soldiers come in," the alewife snorts, "or nearest the pot when the stew burns." The scholar accepts these comments as if they belong in the margin of his manuscript. "Yes," he says, "proximity is promise and threat together." The fire glows on his cheekbones. He describes the senator's places, the fine lines of status, the narrow dignity of sitting where everyone can see whether your hand trembles. You imagine a Roman noble lowering himself onto stone, arranging his robe, nodding to men around him, perhaps pretending not to notice that the arena is too near. He has not climbed to a safe distance. He is descended into prestige. The crowd above can look down on him as he looks down on the sand. That is the trap of the lowest seats. The person seated there is watcher, and watched at once. No one can quite agree whether those men felt fear, delight, boredom, or only the heavy obligation to appear unmoved. The scholar says old accounts often care more for emperors, games, and marvels than for the private pulse of a spectator's throat. But you know something of private fear. You have felt it crossing a rotten bridge while pretending the river below was merely decorative. You have felt it passing a dark wood where villagers tied bells to cattle to keep spirits away. A person can look calm while every small bone inside is writing its will. A boy, perhaps the alewife's apprentice, comes to rake the hearth and add a split log. He wears a charm of rowan twig stitched to his sleeve, meant to keep witches from souring milk and making horses lame. Some swear rowan works best if cut before sunrise with a clean blade. Others say the important part is believing the neighbour's cow will fail before yours. The boy catches sight of the manuscript bundle and asks whether it contains a spell. "Only history," says the scholar. The boy seems disappointed. History, to him, is clearly the weaker magic. You return to your pottage. It has thickened as it cools, becoming less a meal than an argument in a bowl. Still, it steadies you. Bread, ale, warmth, a bench by the fire, these are not small gifts. In medieval life, comfort is often plain and brief, and one learns not to insult it by asking for cushions. The scholar's voice lowers. He tells you that the lowest seats could make danger intimate. A creature rushing below might strike the barrier, and though it could not reach the nobleman usually, perhaps, if all went as planned, the body does not wait for proof. It flinches first. Sand might scatter upward. A dropped weapon might flash too near. A wounded animal's cry, or a man's shout, or the sudden motion of guards could turn ceremony into panic for a heartbeat. The great crowd might roar with pleasure, fear, hunger, anger, and when many thousands make one sound, even stone seems to listen. You feel the alehouse roof press low overhead. Smoke coils into the rafters. The dog dreams beneath the bench, one paw twitching as if pursuing a Roman sausage across the centuries. Your red thread charm has loosened at your wrist, and you wind it tighter with your thumb. The scholar lifts his cup but does not drink. The dangerous seat, he says, is not always where death is certain. It may be where safety is believed too strongly. Outside, the market bell rings again. Dim through shutters and smoke, you sit quietly, hearing it fade. The lowest Roman seats remain in your mind, proud, polished, close to the sand, close to applause, close to fear, and in the smoky alehouse, with warmth at your knees and mud drying on your hem, you begin to understand that some honours bring a person nearer to the very things ordinary folk are wise enough to watch from far away. Rain begins while you're still inside the alehouse, first as a soft tapping on the shutters, then as a steady drumming that makes everyone glance upward, as if the roof has just announced a legal complaint. The market outside loosens and scatters. Sellers drag cloth over baskets. A man curses gently at a mule. The church bell sounds blurred through the weather, and the alewife, with the wisdom of one who has seen many soaked travellers become poor customers, tells you that the West Gate will be crowded if you mean to leave before dark. So you leave. This proves, at once, to be heroic and foolish in equal measure, which is a very medieval combination. The street has turned slick, the rushes thrown outside doorways flattening into brown mats under boots and hooves. Water runs along the gutter carrying straw, onion peel, ash, and one tragic cabbage leaf that seems to have accepted its fate. Your cloak drinks rain greedily. The scholar tucks the manuscript deep beneath his outer wrap, one hand guarding the satchel as if it holds a sleeping bird. The dog follows, delighted. Rain, apparently, is only weather to those who do not own parchment. You reach the town gate just as a cart jams beneath the arch. Its load of wool sacks has shifted, and one wheel has settled into a rut with the stubbornness of sin. The gatehouse is thick-walled, smelling of wet wood, old straw, horses, and iron. Travellers cluster beneath it, a pair of pilgrims with badges pinned to their hats. 3 market women hugging baskets under their shawls, a drover with rain running from his nose, and a guard who looks as if he's been damp since birth. The broken cart blocks the way. No one is going anywhere for a little while. The guard declares this with deep satisfaction, because men with authority often enjoy moments when the whole world becomes someone else's inconvenience. You stand under the arch where rain falls in shining strings beyond the stones. The scholar leans against the wall, listening to the cartmen argue. One insists the wheel must be lifted, the other insists it must be prayed over. A market woman says Saint Eligius watches over metalwork and horses, and perhaps wheels if asked politely. Some swear that rubbing a little bacon grease on an axle keeps both squeal and evil spirits away, though the scholar murmurs that evil spirits must be very patient if they travel by cart. The delay gives him an opening. Consider this gate, he says, touching the stone beside him. It promises safety by controlling passage. You look at the portcullis above, its iron teeth raised into shadow. Thick oak doors stand open, black with rain. Murder holes pierce the vaulted ceiling overhead, though the guard has hung a bundle of drying socks from one, which removes some dignity from the defences. The scholar smiles. Architecture says come here, not there. Enter this way, not that. Stand where you may be watched. Rome understood such language very well. He begins to speak of the Colosseum not as a ruin or a legend, but as a carefully ordered body. Its outer arches swallowed crowds, its stairways divided them, its corridors guided them to proper levels. Numbered entrances, passages, barriers, walls, and seating lines moved tens of thousands without, at least in theory, turning all into chaos. The building was not simply large, it was disciplined. You watch rainwater bead along the gatehouse stones and imagine Roman crowds flowing through vaulted corridors, each person pressed onward by habit, ticket, rank, and the shoulders of others. In this little town gate, a single broken cart has halted half the morning. Rome, by contrast, tried to move a sea of people with stone channels and human expectation. That seems nearly magical, though the scholar would object to the word. He tells you that between the arena and the lower spectators stood barriers a high wall, smooth surfaces difficult to climb, perhaps metal railings, attendants, guards, and sometimes nets or screens meant to stop animals, weapons, or wild accidents from reaching honoured seats. No one can quite agree how every barrier looked in every century, for buildings change as rulers change, and later hands repair what earlier hands break. But the idea is plain enough. Danger was displayed, framed, and restrained. It was meant to appear close while remaining contained. Meant to, says the drover, who's begun listening. That is a thin cloak in bad weather. The scholar nods. Yes, meant to. The guard spits into the straw. Walls fail if fools build them, or if clever men trust them too much, the scholar says. The cartmen finally try lifting the wheel. Everyone watches, because other people's labour is one of the oldest entertainments. The wheel rises half an inch, slips, and drops back into the rut with a wet sound. The dog barks once, as though offering professional criticism. Rain thickens outside. Under the gate, bodies settle into waiting. One pilgrim unwraps smoked fish from a cloth and eats it with coarse bread. A market woman shares a handful of roasted peas with her companion. The guard drinks from a leather bottle and claims it is only watered ale, though no one asked. You lean beneath the arch and feel cold creeping through your sleeves. The scholar continues gently. A barrier changes fear. It does not erase it. A man seated near the arena sees the beast, hears the strike against the wall, feels the crowd jump around him. His mind knows there is stone. His body hears claws. The words move through you more quietly than thunder. You remember sitting near the alehouse hearth, hearing the fire shift too suddenly, and feeling your hand draw back before thought arrived. Bodies are old things. They believe noise before reason. In Rome, he says, the planners made danger into a kind of controlled nearness. The crowd could see enough to gasp, enough to lean forward, enough to feel privilege sharpened by peril. Those in the higher seats saw patterns, movement, colour, dust, the grand shape of spectacle. Those low down saw details: eyes, teeth, sweat, stumbling feet, the tremor of handlers, the quick motion of guards. The lower seat was therefore a lesson in architecture's boldest claim that stone could bargain with fear and win. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the people who sat there trusted the engineering, trusted the emperor, trusted the gods, or simply trusted that danger happened mainly to others. Medieval folk know this weakness well. A lord rides over a bridge before the mason has finished warning him. A reeve stores grain under a leaking roof because last winter was kind. A traveller sees clouds gather and says there is time to reach the next town. You, for instance, left the alehouse just before rain. Which proves history teaches slowly. At last, the cartwheel is freed by a combination of lifting, shouting, bacon grease, and a prayer to Saint Eligius delivered with uncertain pronunciation. The wool sacks are pushed straight. The guard waves the cart through as though he personally invented movement. Travellers begin to pass beneath the arch and out into the wet road. You step after them, rain striking your hood in small cold taps. Behind you, the gatehouse swallows its own shadows. Ahead, the road bends beyond fields silvered with water, and the scholar walks beside you with the manuscript safe under cloth, speaking now of barriers that hold, barriers that fail, and the strange human desire to sit close enough to danger to feel alive, yet far enough away to believe oneself wise. The dog trots through puddles with cheerful contempt for both Rome and engineering. The road beyond the gate is a wet ribbon under a low sky, and for a time your world narrows to the sound of rain on wool, the suck of mud around your boots, and the scholar's staff striking stones hidden beneath brown water. The broken cart from the gatehouse moves ahead of you, slower now, its rescued wheel creaking in a wounded rhythm. Every turn sounds like a complaint filed against the road itself. The dog has adopted the cart, or perhaps the cart has adopted the dog. It trots beside the wheel, then darts beneath the axle, then returns to your side with the important air of a creature supervising several kingdoms at once. The carter occasionally tells it to leave. The dog ignores him with the calm confidence of an abbot ignoring weather. You walk beside the cart because the road is too narrow to pass without stepping into the ditch, and the ditch looks deep enough to hold both water and regret. The wool sacks under their damp cover smell strongly of sheep, lanolin, and hard travel. The carter, whose name turns out to be Osric, wears a hood patched with 3 different browns, and tied to the cart's front rail is a little bundle of dried herbs, a bent horseshoe, and a strip of blue cloth. For the wheel, he says when he sees you looking, for the wheel eye keeps it from splitting. The scholar glances at the wobbling wheel. Does it, Osric considers this? Not today, but it has many other days. Some swear blue cloth tied to a wagon pleases the Virgin and confuses malicious spirits, especially those blamed for cracked axles, sour milk, and babies who refuse sleep. No one can quite agree whether spirits truly trouble wheels, but every traveller agrees that wheels trouble travellers, and that may be close enough. The scholar walks with one hand on his satchel, his cloak dark from rain. There were others close to the Roman arena besides senators, he says, taking up the thread as naturally as the road takes water. The lowest seats held the high-born and honoured. Yes, but danger also belonged to those who served the spectacle. You step around a stone, then another, listening as the cart creaks ahead. He speaks first of senators, in Rome. They sat low because their rank demanded visibility. Their seats did not merely offer a good view, they announced their place in the city's body. A senator was not hidden in the crowd. He was displayed among his equals, near enough to the emperor's presence, near enough to be noticed by friends, rivals, clients, and enemies. To sit there was to be part of the public face of order. You imagine them in pale garments, arranged like carved figures along the lower curve, faces controlled, hands folded, every nod and whisper measured. A man might watch the arena, but another man might watch him watching. In such a place, even leaning forward too eagerly could become gossip by sunset. Politics, the scholar murmurs, is sometimes a bench with teeth. Osric laughs once, then checks his wheel as if afraid the bench may hear. Then there were priests, the scholar says, and sacred officials whose presence folded religion into public spectacle. Rome was full of rites, omens, duties, and old formulas that had to be done properly, because even a mighty city feared offending powers it could not see. Some spectators may have worn amulets or touched charms before the games. Some may have watched the birds, the weather, the behaviour of animals, or the strange accidents that people turn into signs when they already feel uneasy. Those who tell the tale never fully agree how solemn the mood remained once the crowd grew hungry for excitement, but the old habits of omen reading clung to Roman life like burrs to wool. You pass a small wayside shrine where rainwater drips from the carved hood above a painted saint. Someone has left 3 beans, a feather and a candle stub at the base. Brother Anselm would likely disapprove of the beans, or at least ask for a better explanation. You touch the red thread at your wrist and keep walking. The scholar continues. Officials sat close to magistrates, sponsors, men responsible for order, ceremony, announcements, and the smooth running of the day. In a medieval hall, you know the steward must stand near enough to the lord to receive orders and near enough to the servants to terrify them. In the same way, Roman officials occupied places where their authority could be seen. They watched the arena, but also watched the crowd, the timing, the entrances, the signals. If something went wrong, their fine seat might suddenly become a workplace with very poor walls. Osric snorts. A man with a title always sits where blame can find him. The scholar nods, often. The rain fades into mist, and the road dips toward a stretch of woodland. Trees lean over you, bare branches combing the pale sky. Wet leaves lie thick in the ruts. The cartwheel stutters, catches, and rolls on. You smell damp bark, soaked wool, and the faint sweetness of crushed fern. Somewhere beyond the trees a woodcutter's axe knocks slowly, like a distant bell made of timber. And then, says the scholar, there were attendants. His voice softens. These were not honoured men with polished places. They were workers of the arena guards, handlers, cleaners, gatekeepers, men who managed ropes, doors, barriers, animals, weapons, props, sand, signals, and bodies. Some may have stood rather than sat. Some may have crouched near entrances. Some may have waited in passages where the crowd could not see them. Their danger was different. They were close not because of pride, but because work placed them there. You think of the alehouse boy raking the hearth, the lay brother hauling water before dawn, the market women lifting baskets in rain, the porter turning iron keys while others sleep. Medieval life teaches that danger often comes quietly to those who must stand near the moving parts. The cook near the fire, the smith near the sparks, the carter beneath the wheel, the shepherd in wolf country, the laundress with cracked hands in winter water. The grand people receive the names. The attendants receive the bruises. The dog suddenly barks at the cartwheel and leaps away as it drops into a rut. Osric curses. The scholar grabs the side rail and you help push. Mud slides under your boots. The wheel turns once, twice, and sticks. Everyone stops. For a few damp minutes, history becomes less important than leverage. Osric wedges a branch beneath the wheel. You and the scholar push from behind. The dog contributes moral encouragement by standing exactly where it should not. At last the wheel lurches free, splattering mud across your hem. Osric looks at the blue cloth charm tied to the cart rail. See helped. The scholar wipes mud from his sleeve. I hesitate to dispute such evidence. You continue more slowly after that. The road rises from the trees, and through the mist you see open fields again, pale under the afternoon's tired light. The scholar does not rush his tale. He lets the creaking cart, the damp hedges, and the soft paws of the dog carry it forward. So the most dangerous seat, he says, may have belonged to a senator, honoured and exposed, or to a priest, reading omens too near the sand, or to an official, responsible when order cracked, or to an attendant, whose place was not a seat at all, but a duty beside the machinery of fear. You walk on with mud cooling on your legs and rain easing from your hood, Behind you, the town gate is gone from sight. Ahead, smoke rises from some unseen hamlet. The dog trots beside the broken wheel as if escorting Rome itself through the countryside, and you begin to feel that the arena's danger was not held in one chair, one bench, or one row, but spread like damp through every place where pride, work, rank, and obedience brought human bodies too close to the sand. By late afternoon, the road narrows between low fields and a strip of winter woodland, and the cart's broken wheel has quieted into a steady groan, like an old door remembering every hand that ever opened it. Osric guides the horse with soft clicks of his tongue. The scholar walks beside you with his cloak damp at the shoulders, and the dog, having appointed itself guardian of all wheels, trots importantly between hoofprints filled with rainwater. The air smells of wet earth, bruised grass, and distant peat smoke. Crows stitch themselves across the pale sky. The light is thinning, not yet evening, but moving toward it with that slow medieval certainty that makes every traveller think about shelter, fire, and whether bread remains in the bag. You feel the day in your knees. Mud has dried in stiff ridges on your hem. Your fingers are cold again, though you keep flexing them inside your sleeves as if they are disobedient servants. A roadside shrine appears where the woodland begins a low stone niche beneath a twisted hawthorn, roofed with slate and dark with years of weather. Inside stands a small painted figure of a saint, though the face has faded until it might be anyone patient enough to stand in the rain. Around the base lie offerings, candle stubs, a cracked bead, 2 pins, a wooden comb, a tiny clay horse, and a strip of blue cloth much like the one tied to Osric's cart. Someone has wedged a Roman-looking tile into the back of the niche, its red surface stamped with worn marks that may be letters, or may only be the scratches of time. The scholar stops. Osric sees the shrine and removes his cap. Saint guards the crossing, he says. Which saint, you ask? He squints at the painted figure. Depends who you ask. That seemed honest enough. No one can quite agree whether the shrine began as a Christian resting place, an old boundary marker, or something older still, from a time when villagers left milk beneath trees and whispered to springs before the priests had finished persuading them not to. The hawthorn is hung with scraps of cloth, and Brother Anselm would certainly have opinions about that. Some swear hawthorn keeps evil from thresholds and travellers from wandering into fairy paths. Others say it is only a thorn tree with excellent public relations. You step closer. Rainwater drips from the slate roof into a little hollow worn in the stone. The dog sniffs the offerings, considers the clay horse, and decides not to steal from saints today, which shows either reverence or good sense. The scholar touches the red tile gently. Roman, perhaps. Osric folds his arms. Everything is Roman to you. Not everything, the scholar says. Only the things Rome left behind. The tile sits crookedly behind the saint, half hidden by wax smoke. It may have come from a villa floor, a bathhouse wall, a fort, a kiln, a ruin no one remembers. Or it may be from an old barn and improved by storytelling. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such objects survive as truth, ornament, warning, or trade. In medieval hands, Rome becomes many things at once giant's work, pagan pride, imperial lesson, quarry, legend, and convenient stone. Osric kneels long enough to mutter a prayer for the wheel, the horse, and the road ahead. Then he leaves a bent nail among the offerings. For iron luck, he says. Best not to arrive empty-handed. The scholar does not mock him. Instead, he draws the manuscript bundle from beneath his cloak, keeping it wrapped against the damp. He does not need to open it to continue. The tale now seems to live as much in his memory as in the parchment. Medieval men look at Rome and see what they need to see, he says. Some see cruelty, some see grandeur, some see proof that pride builds high and falls hard, some see useful walls. You look at the shrine, where a faded saint stands before a doubtful Roman tile under a tree thick with older whispers. The scholar's words feel true. The past is not lying still, it is being used. Monks copy Roman histories by candlelight and add stern notes in the margins. Lords pull dressed stones from old ruins to strengthen towers. Villagers grind grain in mills whose foundations rest on ancient roads. Relic sellers sell chips of brick with brave faces. Children dare one another to touch carved pagan heads on church walls after dusk. What remains of Rome is everywhere, but never quite itself. The scholar speaks more softly of the Colosseum, not as Romans knew it, but as medieval minds imagine it, a huge broken crown of arches, haunted by martyrs in some tales, by demons in others, by emperors swollen with pride, by wild beasts and crowds whose shouting seems to have soaked into the stone. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the arena is a monument to power, punishment, vanity, courage, wicked pleasure, or the sheer Roman habit of making everything enormous. Perhaps it is all of these, depending on who stands before it and what fear they bring. You think of the dangerous seat again. A medieval preacher might say the most dangerous place was the honoured seat, because pride sits there wearing good cloth. A knight might say it was the place nearest the beast, because courage and foolishness share a narrow bench. A peasant might say it belonged to the poor attendant ordered to stand by the gate, because danger often follows command more closely than glory. A monk might say the worst seat was any seat from which a person watched suffering and called it entertainment. The scholar nods when you say this last thought aloud. Brother Anselm would like that answer, he says. He would pretend not to, but he would. A gust moves through the hawthorn scraps, fluttering them like small trapped prayers. The red thread at your wrist stirs too. You remember the alewife tying it there, the toll-keeper biting the coin, the monk's rue, Osric's blue cloth, the shrine beans from the morning, all the little ways people bargain with uncertainty. Romans had charms. Medieval travellers have charms. Perhaps every age tells itself it is wiser than the last while tying knots against the dark. Osric rises and checks the wheel again. The nail he left at the shrine is gone from his hand, and this seems to satisfy him. Road bends west, he says. There's a watchfire near the old quarry if we keep steady. The old quarry, the scholar tells you, may once have yielded stone for a Roman building, though Osric only sighs. The dog stretches, shakes rain from its fur, and sneezes toward the shrine, which you hope is not blasphemy. Before you leave, the scholar places one small coin beside the candle stubs, not enough to impress a saint, perhaps, but enough to admit that roads are long and certainty is scarce. You follow his example with a crumb of bread, because it is what you have. Then you move on beneath the hawthorn, past the saint with no agreed name and the tile with no certain origin. The woodland closes briefly around the road. Behind you, the shrine fades into grey light, still holding its doubtful relics and older memories together in one damp little shelter. Ahead, evening gathers blue among the fields, and somewhere beyond the next rise, a watchfire waits, ready to turn the story from stone and relic into shadow, smell, heat, and the roar that ancient crowds once carried into the dark. Evening settles before the road is finished with you. The sky turns the colour of old lead, then deepens toward blue. and the fields on either side lose their edges until hedges, ditches, and low stone walls become one dark seam stitched across the land. Osric's cart moves more slowly now, the repaired wheel still turning but complaining under its breath. The horse lowers its head, steaming softly. The dog trots close to the cart, no longer playful, as if the coming night has given it official duties. At last, you reach the old quarry. It lies beyond a low rise, half hidden by thorn and elder, a hollow bitten from the earth long ago. Rainwater shines at the bottom in black pools. Broken stones jut from the grass like worn teeth. Some swear the place was Roman, though others say monks later took stone from it for barns, walls, and one chapel tower that leans as if listening for confession. No one can quite agree whether the oldest cuts in the rock were made for Empire Abbey, or some forgotten lord who simply wanted better blocks than his neighbour. Near the quarry's edge burns the watchfire Osric promised. It is small but welcome, built beneath a rough shelter of poles and sodden brush, with a ring of stones around it and a stack of damp wood smoking nearby. 2 men sit beside it, wrapped in cloaks, keeping night watch over the road and the quarry track. One holds a spear across his knees, the other mends a leather strap with a bone needle. They greet Osric by name and grumble about the weather, which is the proper password among cold people. You settle near the fire, your boots steam. Your cloak releases the smell of wet wool so strongly that even the dog gives you a thoughtful look. Osric cuts a heel of coarse bread with his knife and shares smoked fish from a cloth. The scholar contributes a small onion, wrinkled but still proud. You eat with cold fingers, passing the food from hand to hand, each bite salted by smoke, road dust, and gratitude. A wooden cup of thin ale travels around the fire. No one drinks deeply. The night is long, and the watchmen say too much ale invites both sleep and foolish songs. One of the watchmen tosses a pinch of salt into the flames before eating. For wandering things, he says. The scholar raises an eyebrow. Foxes, spirits, men who borrow horses. Some swear salt in fire keeps away ill-wishers and restless dead. Others say it only makes supper smaller. Still, no one stops him, and the little sparks that leap upward feel briefly important. The scholar sits with his back to a stone, manuscript safe under his cloak. Firelight touches his face in shifting red and gold. Around you, night gathers thickly. The road behind has vanished. The market town is gone except in memory its toll coin, its relic sellers, its shouted prices, its onion peel sliding in rain. The monastery bell is too far away to hear, yet you remember its patient tapping before dawn. You remember Brother Anselm's warning, the half-burned candle, the smell of old ink. These things travel inside you now, quieter than footsteps, but just as real. The scholar begins again, and his voice is low enough that the fire seems to lean closer. To understand the dangerous seat, he says, you must imagine not only sight, but sound. The watchmen listen. Osric chews. The dog places its head on its paws. He describes the Colosseum not as a picture in a book, but as a body full of breath. Thousands of people gathered in rising tiers, wrapped in heat, impatience, hunger, pride, and expectation. Their voices did not remain separate. They merged into waves. A murmur could climb into a roar. A roar could break against stone and return upon itself. The lowest spectators sat where that sound pressed down from above and burst upward from below, so that a man's ribs might feel the crowd before his ears understood it. You listen to the quarry wind move over the hollow stones. The watchfire cracks, a small sound in a large dark. It is easy, almost too easy, to imagine a much greater noise filling a ring of Roman stone. The scholar speaks of smell next. Not politely, not too much, but enough. Dust on hot sand, sweat under wool and linen, oil, perfume, damp awnings, animal musk, iron, trampled garlands, spilled wine, packed bodies in sun. The rich might hold scented cloths. The poor high above might smell only the crowd around them, but those low down, closest to the arena floor, would know the sharpest edge of everything. The air itself would arrive, carrying news of what had happened and what was coming. You glance at the smoked fish in your hand and decide the ancient world, like the medieval one, was not designed for delicate noses. The scholar continues. The sand below would not stay smooth. It would lift under feet, hooves, paws, wheels, and sudden movement. Dust would rise and settle on lips, sleeves, hair, and polished stone. In the lower seats, a noble might taste the arena without ever stepping into it. A little grit between the teeth, a sting in the eye, a cough hidden behind a hand because dignity does not like being seen choking. One watchman gives a sleepy laugh. Even lords cough. Constantly, says Osric, they merely blame the room. The fire warms your knees. Beyond it, the quarry pools reflect the flames in broken pieces. Then the scholar turns to the animals. He keeps the telling gentle, not dwelling on pain, but on nearness, the weight of a large body moving below, the scrape of claws against barrier stone, the sudden heave of a creature startled by noise, the crack of handlers' commands, the quick tightening of guards near the gates. In the higher seats, animals might seem part of a pattern, part of the spectacle's shape. From the lowest seats, they were breath, muscle, eye, and speed. They were not symbols. They were alive. Even now, it is hard to tell whether those seated near the arena felt thrilled, honoured, afraid, or trapped by the need to appear calm. Perhaps each man felt all of it in one breath. Perhaps one senator smiled while his foot slid back beneath his robe. Perhaps one priest read an omen in a beast's refusal to move. Perhaps one official watched the barrier more carefully than the crowd. Weapons too, the scholar says, could make nearness dangerous without ever striking. A flash of metal below the wall, a dropped spear skidding wrong, a practice stroke turned wild, an attendant hurrying too close to the edge. Fear often comes from what nearly happens. A body remembers the almost as well as the wound. You think of the cartwheel sinking in mud, of your hands pushing hard, of the dog leaping away at the last instant. Nothing terrible happened, yet your shoulders still remember the jolt. The mind may prefer stories with endings, but the body keeps footnotes. The watchfire sinks lower. One of the men adds wood, and smoke rolls under the shelter. You pull your cloak tighter, holding warmth where you can. The scholar's face dims, then brightens again. The most dangerous seat, he says, may have been dangerous because it offered the illusion of mastery. A man sat close enough to danger to feel its heat, while trusting stone, rank, guards, and empire to keep him untouched. The phrase hangs with the smoke. Around you, the medieval night answers softly horse breath, wet wool, old stones, a dog dreaming by the fire, a cartwheel cooling after trouble. The quarry lies dark behind your shoulder, perhaps Roman, perhaps not, but old enough to know that stone does not promise forever. You finish the last of the bread and brush crumbs from your glove. Above, clouds break a little, and one pale star shows between them. The watchmen fall quiet. Osric wraps himself in his cloak. The scholar closes his eyes, though you know he is not sleeping yet. In the fire's low glow, the arena seems near not bloody, not loud now, but vast and breathing in memory, with its lowest seats waiting beside the sand, where dust rises, crowds roar, and honoured men sit close enough to learn that fear has a smell, a sound, and a warmth all its own. Morning arrives pale and stiff, as if the sky itself has slept badly on straw. You wake beside the dying watchfire with your cloak pulled up to your chin and your boots near enough to the embers that they are warm on one side and still damp on the other, which feels like a fair summary of travel. The quarry lies quiet behind you, its black pool silvering under a thin wash of light. Osric is already awake, checking the wheel with the care of a man inspecting a sick relative who also owes him money. The dog sits beside him, solemnly observing the process as if it invented wheels in a former life. One of the watchmen gives you a piece of oatcake hard enough to serve in a siege. You chew it anyway, because hunger is a persuasive theologian. The scholar warms his hands over the last coals, then tucks the manuscript close beneath his cloak. Before leaving, Osric ties another knot in the blue cloth charm on the cart rail. Some swear a knot tied at dawn holds better luck than one tied after noon, when the day has already learned bad habits. No one can quite agree whether the knot helps the wheel or only the carter's heart, but either is worth something on a wet road. You set off after sunrise, following a lane that bends away from the quarry toward a manor village. The fields lie broad and winter brown, with stubble showing through frost. A woman in a wool hood drives geese from a pond with a willow switch. A boy carries a pail of skimmed milk, walking carefully because spilled milk may bring a scolding, a hungry cat, or both. Smoke rises from low cottages, and the smell of baking rye reaches you just long enough to feel unfair. By mid-morning you come to the manor court. It is held in the yard beside the Lord's Hall, where a great oak grows crooked over beaten earth. The hall itself is not grand like a castle, but it has thick timber walls, a steep roof, and a door bound with iron straps. Rushes have been laid fresh near the entrance, more for dignity than comfort. A bench stands beneath the oak, and on it sits the steward, wrapped in a fur-lined cloak, with a wax tablet, a small knife, and the expression of a man who enjoys remembering debts. Beside him waits the village reeve, holding a staff. Around the yard stand tenants, widows, servants, 2 millers, a shepherd, a woman accused of letting her pigs root in another man's beans, and a very offended man whose beans they were. You pause at the edge with Osric, the scholar, and the dog. Travellers are permitted to watch so long as they do not interrupt, steal, or ask for decisions to make sense. The steward calls names, men remove caps, women fold hands under sleeves. The reeve speaks of boundary ditches, unpaid hens, broken fences, ale sold in false measures, and one quarrel involving a borrowed plough, a missing iron pin, and language not suitable near the churchyard. The scholar leans close. "Here," he says softly. You see the other face of public order. You watch the woman with the wandering pigs step forward. She does not look afraid exactly, but she looks tired in the way people look when winter has been long and beans matter. The steward hears both sides, frowns at the pigs in their absence, and orders a small fine. The woman nods. The bean owner seems only partly satisfied, which is perhaps the normal condition of bean owners. In Rome, the scholar continues, punishment, order, and spectacle often met in the same place. The crowd did not simply watch danger, it watched power declare itself. You think of the Colosseum's lowest seats, of senators near the sand, of officials watching everything at once. Here, the manor court is smaller, colder, muddier, and far less splendid, but it too depends on being seen. A fine whispered in a pantry is a private irritation. A fine spoken under the oak becomes law with witnesses. Everyone learns who owes what, who was shamed, who argued badly, who must mend a fence before Candlemas. Public memory is the village's second clerk, and it writes in gossip. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether public punishment keeps peace because it frightens people, teaches people, satisfies people, or merely gives them something to discuss while mending nets. Perhaps all four are true, depending on the weather. A young man is brought forward for taking firewood from the Lord's coppice beyond his right. The steward lectures him on custom, boundaries, and the difference between necessity and theft, which is easier to define when one's own hearth is full. The punishment is not brutal, a fine, a warning, and work owed repairing the hedge. Still, the young man's ears burn red while the whole village watches. You feel the discomfort of it. Shame has a cold weather of its own. The scholar's voice remains gentle. In the arena, public order could become entertainment. That is the uneasy thing. Law likes witnesses, power likes display, crowds like stories. Put them together, and the bench of judgment may begin to resemble a stage. A peddler near you mutters that all courts are stages if the steward has a good cloak. You nearly smile, but the steward glances over, and everyone becomes fascinated by the mud. The court pauses while a servant brings a wooden cup of ale to the steward and a platter of coarse bread to those waiting from the hall kitchen. You receive a small piece because Osric knows the kitchen maid's brother, or claims to, which in medieval society is sometimes enough. The bread is dark and sour, but welcome. Near the hall door, a woman rubs a child's wrist with a paste of sage and goose fat, saying it draws out winter stiffness. Some swear sage strengthens memory, limbs, and courage. The child appears unconvinced, but pleasantly greasy. The scholar watches the court resume. Roman spectacle did not invent the human habit of watching judgment. He says, it enlarged it. Stone gave the crowd a body. Seats gave hierarchy a shape. The emperor's presence, the officials, the priests, the senators, the people, all were arranged so that punishment could look like order, and order should feel like celebration. You look at the villagers under the oak. They are not celebrating. They are cold, hungry, curious, anxious, amused in small guarded ways, and deeply interested in whether their neighbour must pay 2 hens or 3. Yet you sense the same thread, thin but strong. Public judgment binds a community by showing what happens when rules bend too far. It also tempts people to enjoy another person's exposure. Medieval hearts are not made of softer material than Roman ones. They simply wear more wool. The steward gives a final decision about the plough pin. The loser spits in the mud after turning away, perhaps for luck, perhaps from opinion. The dog noses hopefully toward the hall kitchen and is denied by a cook with a ladle. Osric's wheel is inspected by a blacksmith's apprentice, who declares it will last if treated kindly, which is not a phrase roads understand. As you leave the manor yard, the scholar walks quietly beside you. So, he says, when we ask where the dangerous seat was, we must ask what danger means. The nearest bench to the sand was dangerous to the body. The seat of judgment is dangerous to mercy. The emperor's seat may be dangerous to the soul, and the crowd's seat perhaps that is dangerous because it teaches ordinary people to watch without feeling the weight of what they see. You follow the lane past the hall, past a winter storehouse locked with an iron key, past hens scratching among straw, behind you. The manor court continues beneath the oak, small voices rising and falling in the cold morning. Ahead, The road bends toward open fields, and Rome travels with you again, quieter now, less like a roar and more like a question when people gather to watch power at work. Who is truly safe in their seat? You leave the manor court with the sound of judgment still hanging behind you, like smoke that refuses to find the roof hole. The lane runs between the hall's outer fence and a row of cottages where winter washing hangs stiff on a line, more frozen than dry. A woman beats mud from a child's cloak against a post. A man splits kindling beside a shed, each stroke measured and careful, because good firewood is almost a form of prayer when the nights grow long. The dog trots ahead, then returns, then trots ahead again, clearly convinced that the road cannot continue without inspection. Osric's cart turns toward the blacksmith's lean-to near the mill pond, where the wheel may receive iron, advice, and possibly more bacon grease. He bids you farewell with a nod, though the dog hesitates between cart and traveller. After deep consideration, it chooses you. Perhaps because scholars drop crumbs and carts offer mainly anxiety. Osric ties a last knot in the blue charm and says the beast may follow whom it likes, which is a generous thing to say after a day spent being judged by it. The scholar watches the cart creak away. There goes a man who trusts knots more than roads, he says. You touch the red thread at your wrist. There are worse habits. There are many. He agrees. Past the village, near a low stone bridge, stands a small house belonging to the parish clerk. It leans beside the churchyard wall, narrow and smoky, with a thatched roof patched in darker straw. The scholar knows the clerk, as scholars seem to know all men who possess ink, or at least all men who may lend a dry table. He knocks on the oak door with his staff. After a moment, it opens to reveal a thin man with ink on his fingers, a candle in one hand, and a face that looks as if sleep owes him money. The clerk's name is Martin, and he welcomes you with the cautious kindness of someone who owns fragile things. His room smells of soot, parchment, vinegar, dried apples, and the sharp iron scent of ink. A brazier glows near the wall. Shelves hold folded accounts, wax tablets, a bundle of goose quills, a little horn of black ink, and several books chained to a desk. Not because they are wicked, but because books wander quickly when no one watches them. Some swear a sprig of lavender kept in a book chest protects pages from worms and forgetful borrowers. Martin keeps lavender, rosemary, and a written curse, which seems thorough. Fresh rushes lie in a thin layer near the hearth. A pot of pottage bubbles quietly, mostly beans and onion, with perhaps a memory of bacon if one listens kindly. Martin gives you a wooden stool. The dog circles 3 times and lies beneath the desk as if it has found a post of honour. The scholar unwraps the manuscript and lays it near the candle. Careful, Martin says at once. I am always careful. All men with manuscripts say that just before disaster. The scholar accepts this as fair. Together, they place small weights at the corners of the parchment leaves a smooth stone, a bit of lead, a knife with a worn handle, and Martin's little inkhorn, stoppered tightly. The candlelight steadies. Outside, rooks call from the churchyard yews. The village noises soften behind stone and thatch. The scholar turns to the passage Brother Anselm marked in the monastery guest-house. You recognise the shape of it now, though not the words, the cramped Latin lines, the browning ink, the narrow margin crowded by a second hand. Martin leans close, squinting. His lips move as he reads silently. Then he makes a small sound. Not quite a laugh, and not quite a cough. Ah, he says. This scribe had opinions. The scholar looks pleased. Most do. Martin taps the margin with one careful fingernail. Here. The note is not merely about the low seats. You lean closer. The script in the margin is smaller, sharper, almost irritated. It looks like a whisper scratched into the edge of time. The scholar translates slowly. He writes that the nearest seat to the sand threatens the flesh, but the seat of command threatens judgment, and the seat of pleasure threatens the soul. For a moment, no one speaks. The pottage bubbles. The dog sighs. A coal settles in the brazier with a soft red collapse. No one can quite agree whether the scribe who wrote the note had ever seen Rome, or whether he only imagined it from older accounts, sermons, and the stern furniture of his own mind. Perhaps he had travelled south as a young monk and stood before the ruined arches. Perhaps he'd never crossed farther than the next market town. Yet the warning feels less like geography and more like weather. It moves easily from empire into the little clerk's room. Martin reads further. He says the proud man fears claws but not praise, fears sudden death, but not the slow hardening of his heart. The scholar nods. That is Brother Anselm's kind of sentence. You imagine the monk from the first night, brown robe patched at both elbows, watching the manuscript with professional gloom. You can almost hear him approving of the margin by pretending to disapprove of its handwriting. The scholar explains that a medieval scribe copying Roman history did not simply copy facts. He met the past with his own fears. If Rome placed senators near the arena, the scribe saw pride. If Rome placed the emperor above the crowd, he saw the burden and temptation of command. If Rome filled the higher tiers with ordinary spectators, he saw the danger of delighting in what should trouble the conscience. The dangerous seat in this marginal warning is no longer one block of stone. It becomes any place where a person sits too comfortably before another's peril. You look down at your own stool, it is uneven, and one leg has been mended with a wedge. Comfort is not its chief sin. Still, the thought settles in you. The world is full of seats, the Lord's bench at court, the steward's stool under the oak, the high table in a hall, the monk's place in choir, the market toll-keeper's booth, even the warm side of a hearth where one traveller sits while another remains in rain. Every seat teaches a person what he may ignore. Martin ladles pottage into wooden bowls. You eat while the scholar and clerk discuss the note. The beans are plain, the onions sweet from long cooking, the bread dark and solid. A small charm of pierced hazelnuts hangs near the window to keep lightning from the house. Some swear hazel knows hidden water and heavenly fire alike. Martin says he keeps it because his aunt insisted, and because arguing with a dead aunt wastes breath. The scholar reads the marginal note once more, softer now. Political danger, he says, lies in being seen by power and needing to please it. Moral danger lies in watching harm become habit. Symbolic danger lies in believing rank makes one separate from ordinary fear. The lowest Roman seats gathered all three: body near sand, reputation near rivals, conscience near spectacle. Outside. The afternoon dims toward evening. The church bell gives a low, tired note. You remember earlier bells, the town bell in mist, the monastery bell before dawn, the market bell through rain. They seem to mark not only hours, but layers of the tale, each one drawing you closer to an answer that refuses to sit still. Martin sprinkles a little sand on the manuscript page to dry a place where damp has softened the ink. He uses sand from a small covered bowl, fine and pale. You watch it fall and feel a strange quietness. Sand on parchment, sand in an arena, sand under footsteps. Sand used to preserve words about danger, long after the danger itself has become dust. The scholar closes the manuscript at last. Our scribe warns us that the most dangerous seat may be the one that makes danger appear meaningful, deserved, or distant. The dog opens one eye, then closes it again, perhaps unimpressed by moral philosophy unless served with bones. You sit beside the brazier as shadows gather in the clerk's room. Your damp boots steam faintly. Your red thread charm is frayed now, but still tied. The half-burned candle from the inn is gone. Yet another candle has taken its place, bending over the same old question. Rome, the scholar, the monk, the market, the manor court, the shrine with its doubtful tile, all of them seem to lean inward, listening to the scribe's odd warning from the margin, beware the seat that lets you watch too closely, judge too easily and feel too little. Before dawn, Martin the parish clerk wakes you by feeding the brazier and trying very hard not to sound like a man who enjoys waking other people. The room is still dark, except for the low red eye of the coals and one beeswax candle trembling beside the chained books. Your cloak has dried badly in the night, stiff at the edges and smelling of smoke, road, and wet wool. Your boots wait near the hearth, hard as if they have formed opinions while you slept. Outside, the church bell calls the first prayers into the cold. Its sound moves through the village slowly, touching roofs, pens, bare trees, and the frozen lane. The dog rises from beneath the desk, stretches long, and gives Martin a look of mild accusation, as though bells are a personal failing of clerks. Martin gives you bread dark with rye, a small lump of cheese, and a handful of dried apples folded in cloth. He also insists the scholar tuck a sprig of rosemary into the manuscript satchel, for memory and against damp. Some swear rosemary sharpens the mind and keeps thieves from forgetting the commandment against stealing. Martin says it at least makes the satchel smell less like old goat. The scholar thanks him with the solemn dignity due both scholarship and herbs. You leave by the churchyard wall while the village still sleeps. Frost has hardened the mud into ridges beneath your boots. The lane shines pale where moonlight catches ice. Above the cottages, smoke crawls from thatch in thin grey threads. Somewhere a rooster begins too early and is answered by no one, which seems correct. The fields open before you, white and silent. Each blade of grass carries frost. The hedges are dark lace. Your breath rises and disappears. The dog trots ahead, leaving prints like little commas across the frozen track. The scholar walks beside you with his staff in hand and the manuscript wrapped close under his cloak, while the last warmth of Martin's brazier fades from your fingers. For a while, no one speaks. The world before sunrise feels too delicate for much talking. You cross a stile glazed with ice, pass a winter storehouse locked with an iron key, and follow a footpath between strips of ploughed earth. The ground is hard enough to ring faintly under your soles. A distant monastery bell, perhaps not Brother Anselm's but kin to it in patience, marks another hour somewhere beyond the fields. At last the scholar says, "We have spoken of those nearest the sand, but there was another seat. You know what he means before he names it. The emperor's—" The word settles over the frost. Emperor. Not lord, not steward, not abbot, not king of a modest wet island with arguments over wool and hens, but emperor man seated where thousands could see him, where law, wealth, ceremony, fear, and expectation gathered like birds on a roof before storm. The scholar tells you that the emperor's seat in the Colosseum was set apart, raised and honoured, guarded by distance, position, attendance, and the whole machinery of Roman order. It was not the lowest bench close to the sand. It did not carry the same bodily danger of dust, lunging beasts, flying splinters, or sudden panic against the barrier. Yet it was perilous in another way. perhaps deeper and colder. From that place, the emperor watched the arena, and all Rome watched him watching. You step carefully through a gate where the latch is tied with the rope because the iron hook has broken. The dog squeezes beneath and shakes frost from its whiskers. In the next field, sheep huddle near a hedge, their wool silvered white. A shepherd's hut stands low and round, smoke leaking from its roof hole. Some swear sheep refuse to lie calmly when wolves or spirits pass near, though these sheep seem concerned mainly with breakfast and the unfairness of frost. The scholar continues. Imagine sitting where every gesture matters. A nod, a lifted hand, a turned face, a delay in mercy, a smile given too soon or too late. The emperor does not merely see spectacle. He becomes part of it. You think of the manor steward beneath the oak, of villagers watching whether he frowned before speaking. You think of the toll keeper at the gate, the alewife ruling her smoky room, Brother Anselm standing over the manuscript like judgment in sandals. Power, even small power, changes the air around it. People study it. They guess at its mood. They build weather from its eyebrows. No one can quite agree whether the emperor's place was safer because it stood apart, or more dangerous because no one sitting there could ever be private. A man in the lowest seat might fear the arena. A man in the imperial seat might fear the crowd, the Senate, the army, his rivals, his own image, and perhaps the strange hunger that grows when everyone waits for his will. The path dips into a hollow where mist lies thick over frozen reeds. You hear water moving under ice in a ditch. The scholar slows, and his voice softens. A dangerous seat may be protected by guards and still expose the soul. The emperor's seat asked a man to judge, reward, appear generous, appear strong, satisfy crowds, honour custom, flatter the gods, and remind Rome that Rome was held together by his presence. You cross a plank bridge slick with frost. It bends slightly beneath you. The dog crosses first, then looks back as if judging your technique. You keep your arms out for balance, and the scholar follows, muttering that Roman bridges were better, though you suspect he would say this even while falling through one. On the far side, dawn begins to pale the east. The fields emerge little by little furrows, hedges, bare willows, a distant mill, the black line of a road beyond the pasture. Your red thread charm has frayed nearly through, and you twist it once more around your wrist. The scholar says that some medieval writers loved to imagine mighty rulers humbled. They told of emperors who became warnings, kings who vanished into dust, proud men whose towers outlived their names. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such stories preserve truth, hope, envy, or the deep comfort ordinary people take in knowing that the grandest seat is not immune to cold judgment. The emperor in his honoured place may seem above danger, yet he sits beneath more eyes than anyone. He cannot cough without meaning. He cannot hesitate without rumour. He cannot enjoy without revealing appetite. You walk on as the frost brightens. A farmer emerges from a cottage carrying a wooden yoke. He pauses to bow slightly toward a field cross before turning toward his cows. Perhaps he asks for milk, mild weather, and no lameness in the beasts. Perhaps he only stretches his back before work. The old customs often hide inside ordinary movement. The scholar looks toward the growing light. Perhaps the emperor's seat was the most dangerous because it made one man believe he could master the fear of many. And perhaps the lowest seat was dangerous because it made many men believe they were safe beneath one man's order. The thought moves with you through the cold. You remember the market crowd, the gatehouse, the manor court, the scribe's warning, the shrine where Roman tile and saints shared the same damp niche. Every place has its seat, every seat has its watcher. At the top of the next rise you pause, behind you the village lies low in smoke and frost. Ahead, the road runs toward a small keep visible in the distance, its tower dark against the pearl-grey dawn. Somewhere there will be supper, candles, wet wool steaming again, and perhaps a dry corner for the dog if it negotiates well. You begin walking toward it, while the scholar's words fade into the sound of your boots on frozen earth, the emperor's seat, high and guarded, bright with honor, yet perilous because power itself is a kind of arena, and no wall built by human hands can fully protect the one who sits where all eyes gather. The keep grows slowly from the morning fields, first as a dark tooth on the ridge, then as a squat tower with a timber palisade, a ditch half full of old rain, and smoke lifting from its hall roof in a grey ribbon. By the time you reach the outer track, frost has begun to loosen. Each step breaks a thin skin of ice over mud, and your boots return to their familiar work of collecting the road in layers. The dog bounds ahead and waits beside the bridge, tail wagging as though it has personally arranged the fortification. A guard in a wool cap leans above the gate and asks your names. The scholar gives his. He recognizes Martin the clerk's token, a folded scrap sealed with wax, and lets you in after lifting the bar from the oak gate. Iron hinges groan. Somewhere inside, a goose screams for reasons known only to geese and perhaps demons. Some swear a loud goose is better than a sleepy watchman, though a sleepy watchman at least does not bite ankles. Within the palisade, the yard is busy with small labours that hold winter at arm's length. A maid carries kindling, a groom rubs down a horse with straw until steam rises from its flanks. Two boys haul a bucket from the well and spill half of it, arguing over whose turn it is to freeze first. Near the kitchen door, onions hang in ropes, smoked fish dangle from a beam, and a barrel of salted cabbage gives off a sharp smell that suggests survival is not always gentle. You are taken into the hall as afternoon gathers early. It is not royal, but after the road it feels nearly grand. Rushes cover the floor, fresh enough to smell of meadow beneath the smoke. Shields hang from the wall, not all matching, and a long table stands near the hearth. Beeswax candles burn where the Lord's family will sit. Tallow dips smoke along the lower benches. Wet cloaks are hung on pegs, boots left near the wall, and the dog finds the warmest place. The steward, a narrow man with a silver ring and tired eyes, receives the scholar politely. A travelling scholar is useful entertainment in bad weather, when the alternatives are dice, accounts, and listening to the same knight explain how his horse once refused a bridge. You're given a place low on the bench, near servants, carters, and one old woman who spins wool while waiting for supper. She tells you spindle whorls must never be left turning after sunset, or wandering spirits may twist the thread of your dreams. No one can quite agree whether this is ancient wisdom or a grandmother's clever method for making girls put tools away, but she says it with such calm authority that you believe both. Supper comes in wooden bowls, thick pottage of peas and barley, trenchers of coarse bread, a little smoked fish, leeks cooked soft, and ale dark enough to have ambitions. Salt is passed carefully, for salt is dear, and no one spills it without touching the table, muttering a prayer, or blaming a sleeve. You eat with the slow gratitude of the tired. Warmth enters your palms, then wrists, then shoulders. Outside, wind presses at the shutters. Inside, spoons scrape, voices murmur, and the world narrows to firelight. After hunger is quieted, the steward asks for the Roman tale. The scholar unwraps the manuscript, keeping it well away from bowls and ale. The hall shifts toward him. Even those pretending not to listen do so with the whole side of the face. He speaks of the Colosseum again, but now his story changes. The arena is no longer crowded with living Romans. It becomes a ruin. He tells how empires age, though stone makes them look stubborn. Arches stand after voices vanish. Seats remain after names are forgotten. Passages that once guided crowds become shadows for goats, thieves, hermits, pilgrims, quarrymen, and children daring one another to enter. The sand disappears under weeds, rubble, chapels, memory, and invention. The great machine of order becomes a broken hill of stone, and people come to it not with tickets and rank, but with hammers, carts, prayers, fear, and wonder. You glance at the keep walls around you. The scholar has already noticed what the steward later confirms some blocks near the foundation were taken from an older Roman ruin down in the valley. Perhaps a bathhouse, perhaps a villa, perhaps a fort no one remembers. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the stones once warmed beneath painted walls, supported soldiers' boots, framed a noble's courtyard, or simply lay in a field until a mason gave them new duty. Medieval builders do not always ask the past for permission. They ask whether the block is square. The steward points proudly to a carved fragment near the hearth. It shows part of a leaf, or a wing, or perhaps the tail of something mythic. Roman, he says. The scholar bends to look. Possibly. The steward smiles as if possibly is close enough to victory. Around the hall, the tale of Rome turns local. A servant says the old stones in the valley ring hollow if struck at midnight. A groom claims a white woman walks among them before storms, combing her hair with a bone comb. The spinning woman says there is treasure under the broken floor, guarded by a black dog with eyes like coals. Your own dog lifts its head, offended by professional misrepresentation. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether ruins are haunted by the dead, by devils, by memories, or by smugglers who prefer everyone else to believe the first three. The scholar does not laugh. He says ruins invite stories because silence is difficult for human beings. When a place once held power, people feel the emptiness and fill it. The Colosseum, stripped of ordered crowds, became quarry, shrine, warning, marvel, and rumour. Stones that once shaped seating by rank were pulled away to build palaces, churches, walls, and homes. Power may build in stone, yet later hands cut that stone smaller and carry it off in carts. Rain begins again, soft at first, then steadier on the roof. Wet wool steams near the hearth, and candlelight trembles along the manuscript's edge. You think of the lowest seats, the emperor's seat, the scribe's warning, the manor bench, the shrine tile, the quarry pools. Rome has followed you through every place because the medieval world is built partly from its bones. The scholar closes the manuscript gently. Perhaps that is another danger of the honoured seat, he says. It persuades the sitter that the arrangement is permanent. The steward looks into the fire. A servant lays another log on the flames, and sparks climb toward the black rafters. You sit with your bowl warming your knees, listening to rain on old timber and thinking of a Roman stone under medieval walls, of terror softened into legend, of seats once polished by pride now broken into blocks beneath a small keep where tired travellers eat peas by candlelight. After supper, when the bowls are cleared and the trenchers gathered for the hounds, the hall settles into that deep winter hush that comes only after food, fire, and tired bodies have done their work. The rain keeps a soft hand on the roof, Smoke threads upward into soot-black rafters where old hooks, drying herbs, and one forgotten horseshoe hang in shadow. The steward speaks quietly with the scholar near the hearth, while servants sweep crumbs into the rushes and turn the benches back against the wall. Someone banks the fire with ash, someone else pinches out a tallow dip and licks singed fingers without complaint. You sit a while longer, wrapped in borrowed warmth, watching the half-burned candle beside the manuscript shortened by patient degrees. The dog lies on its side near the hearth, paws twitching in sleep, perhaps chasing the black treasure-guarding hound of the old woman's tale and winning by superior laziness. Outside, the wind moves along the palisade with a low wooden groan. The steward's young nephew, a thin lad with solemn eyes and ink on his cuff, offers to show you the tower stair before the night watch changes. The scholar agrees at once, because scholars cannot resist high places, old stones, or chances to say Roman in poor light. You follow them through a side door into the keep's colder passage, where the warmth of the hall falls away behind you like a cloak slipped from the shoulders. The stair is narrow, turning within the wall. Your hand slides along chilled stone, damp in places. The steps are uneven from wear, each one hollowed slightly by feet guards, servants, anxious messengers, bored boys, and perhaps one lord carrying too much wine and too little wisdom. Some swear one must never count tower steps aloud after dark, lest the number change on the way down. No one can quite agree whether this protects against spirits, falling, or mathematics. But the nephew whispers the warning so earnestly that you keep your count inside your head. At the top, he lifts a small latch and pushes open a door bound with iron. Cold night enters at once. You step onto the tower walk, and the world opens beneath you. The keep-yard lies dim below a square of mud, straw, water troughs, and faint lantern glow. Beyond the palisade, fields stretch black and silver under broken cloud. Farther off, the road you came by disappears between hedges. Somewhere in the dark, the manor village sleeps. Somewhere beyond that, the parish clerk's little room holds its chained books and lavender. Farther still, the shrine beneath the hawthorn waits with its doubtful Roman tile. And the quarry pools hold the night in their broken mouths. You lean against the parapet. The wind is cold enough to make your eyes water. The scholar stands beside you, holding his cap down with one hand, manuscript safely below in the hall. Imagine, he says, Rome after the shouting ended. You do. Not all at once. Slowly, as the night wind moves over the tower, the keep becomes a ledge above centuries. The fields below darken into a vast sleeping city. The palisade becomes a curve of ancient stone. The small yard opens into an arena emptied of crowds. You imagine the Colosseum long after emperors, senators, priests, officials, attendants, animals, and spectators have vanished from their places. Arches still stand, though broken. Steps descend toward nothing. Weeds root where sandals once scraped. Rain falls into corridors built for thousands. Birds nest in cracks where men once looked down and thought themselves permanent. The scholar's voice is nearly lost in the wind. When a place falls silent, it asks different questions. You think of the lowest seats first, the front rows near the sand. Their danger was breath close, bodily, immediate. A person there felt heat, dust, noise, and the shudder of living bodies below. It was the danger of nearness, of trusting barriers, of sitting where honour sharpened fear instead of removing it. You imagine those seats empty now, slick with rain, their carved lines softened by time. No senator sits straight-backed there. No official watches the gates. The dust has settled for good, except when wind lifts it. Then you think of the imperial box, higher, set apart, protected, watched. The emperor's seat may never have feared claws in the same way, yet it carried its own storm, thousands of eyes, hunger for decisions, expectation dressed as loyalty, the terrible loneliness of command. From there, a man could believe himself master of the arena, perhaps even master of fear itself. But in the ruin, that seat too is empty. Its power has drained into cracks. Rain does not bow. Birds do not flatter. Ivy climbs without permission. The nephew, who has been listening with wide eyes, asks quietly, "Was the sand more dangerous than the seats?" The scholar does not answer quickly. Below, a guard crosses the yard with a lantern, its light bobbing across puddles. The dog, disturbed by footsteps, barks once in the hall beneath you, then apparently remembers it is tired. "The sand," the scholar says at last, "was danger without disguise. Those placed there did not need a scribe to explain it. The front row disguised danger as privilege. The emperor's place disguised danger as power. The crowd's benches disguised danger as distance. Those words settle into the night like sparks going dark. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the deepest danger belongs to the body, the soul, or the story a person tells himself while seated safely above another's fear. A condemned person on the sand knows peril directly. A senator near the wall may believe rank protects him. An emperor above all may believe command makes him separate. A crowd high in the tiers may believe distance makes watching innocent. Each seat has its own shadow. You pull your cloak tighter. Your red thread charm, frayed and damp from days of the road, has nearly come undone. You tuck the loose end beneath itself and let your hand rest on the cold parapet. The stone under your palm may not be Roman, though the scholar has suspicions about the lower blocks. It is medieval stone now, keeper of rain, smoke, gossip, watch duty, and winter hunger. Yet it speaks the same quiet lesson. All buildings arrange bodies. All seats teach habits. All walls promise more than they can surely keep. The tower bell, small and iron, is struck below to mark the watch. Its note is plain, not rich like the monastery bell, but it travels into the dark and returns from the fields. You remember all the bells before it dusk at the town gate. Dawn in the guest house. Market through rain. Church beside Martin's house. They have guided you from mud to manuscript, from alehouse to shrine, from court to keep, and now upward into cold air where Rome feels both distant and strangely near. The scholar turns from the parapet. Perhaps the most dangerous seat, he says, is whichever one persuades you that you are only watching. You remain a moment longer after he starts down. The nephew waits politely by the door, trying not to shiver. Below, the hall glows through a narrow slit in the wall, warm and amber. The world beyond the tower is nearly still. Somewhere far away, if memory has a sound. The Colosseum stands in moonless silence, its seats empty, its sand gone dark, its imperial place hollow, and its old question drifting like mist through broken arches. Who was truly in danger, the one on the sand? The one nearest it, the one above it, or the many who learn to sit and watch? You follow the scholar down from the tower with cold still clinging to your fingers and the tower bell's plain note fading behind you. The stair turns slowly through the wall, each step uneven beneath your boots, each touch of stone drawing the warmth from your palm. The nephew carries a small lamp below you, and its flame bends whenever a draught slips through the narrow slits in the masonry. Behind the stone, the night presses close, ahead, at the foot of the stair. The hall waits with its smoky rafters, banked fire, and the low murmur of people settling towards sleep. When you step back inside, the warmth feels almost sudden, not bright, not clean, not grand, but human wool blankets laid near the wall, cloaks steaming on pegs, rushes scuffed beneath tired feet, a servant covering the last pottage pot with a wooden board, and the old spinning woman wrapping her distaff in linen so no wandering spirit may twist her dreams. Some swear that a distaff left uncovered after midnight invites night hags to tangle the thread, though the steward says it mostly invites mice. No one can quite agree whether mice are less alarming than night hags, especially near winter stores. The dog has taken the best patch of hearth warmth and looks up only long enough to confirm that you have returned from the cold without snacks. Then it lowers its head again, satisfied that the important business of the household can continue without its intervention. The half-burned candle beside the manuscript still lives, though just barely. Its flame is small and blue at the root, bending toward every breath in the hall. Wax has spilled over the holder and hardened like pale little hills. The scholar sits at the lower end of the table, where the manuscript waits in its linen wrap. Around him, the last listeners gather quietly: the steward, the nephew, one drowsy guard, the spinning woman, and you. No one asks for a grand conclusion. Medieval nights do not favour grandness once the bowls are washed and the doors are barred. They favour blankets, embers, and the soft courage required to sleep in a world of draughts. The scholar rests his hand on the manuscript but does not open it at once. We have followed the seat through mud, he says, through markets, shrines, courts, fields, and towers. Perhaps that is fitting. Old Rome never comes to us clean. You sit on the bench, feeling the days walking in your legs. Your red thread charm has finally loosened, and you hold it between finger and thumb. It is only a bit of thread now, damp, frayed, faded by weather, yet you hesitate to throw it into the rushes. The alewife tied it there on the first night, when the red stag sign swung in the rain and the scholar first spoke of Rome. Since then it has travelled through gate tolls, monastery bells, broken wheels, doubtful relics, manor judgments, frosted fields, and the cold tower walk. It has not protected you from mud, hunger, rain, or moral unease. But perhaps charms rarely promise comfort. Perhaps they only give the hand something to touch when thought grows too wide. The scholar opens the manuscript one last time. The parchment lies under candlelight, its lines cramped and patient. Martin's sand has dried the softened ink. Brother Anselm's warning seems to linger in the margins even from far away. The scholar reads a few words in Latin, then closes his eyes and gives them in the common tongue, gently, without ceremony. The seat nearest the sand endangers flesh. The seat above the sand endangers judgment. The seat among the crowd endangers pity when pity sleeps. The hall is quiet. Outside, the wind moves against the shutters and makes the iron latch tremble once. Somewhere in the yard, a horse shifts in its stall. The keep stones hold the day's rain and the night's cold, while the hearth holds back both as best it can. You think again of the Colosseum as the tower wind asked you to imagine it not in its roaring noon, but after centuries have softened the shout, empty arches, broken rows, grass where sand once lay, birds in high cracks, moonlight touching places once reserved for rank. In that silence the question becomes gentler, but not smaller. Was the most dangerous seat the front row, where honour sat too near fear? Was it the Emperor's place, where power mistook command for safety? Was it the sand itself, where danger needed no disguise? Or was it every seat from which a person learned to watch and feel nothing? Those who tell the tale never fully agree. The scholar does not force them to. He only lets the answers sit together, like travellers around a small fire, each warming a different side of the same truth. The steward folds his hands, then the safest seat, he says, is none at all. The scholar smiles faintly. Perhaps the safest seat is the one where a man remembers he is seated by mercy, not by right. The old spinning woman nods as if this is sensible and also likely to be ignored by anyone with a cushion. The guard yawns behind his sleeve. The nephew stares into the candle flame, storing the words for some future winter when he may repeat them badly and someone else may improve them. This is how tales travel not perfectly but persistently. The scholar closes the manuscript and wraps it once more in linen. The sound is soft, almost like a sheet drawn over a sleeper. He ties the cord with care. The dangerous seat for tonight is no longer in Rome. It is folded into parchment, smoke, memory, and the warm hush of a little keep at the edge of wet fields. It has become a warning small enough to carry and old enough to outlive the hands that carry it. One by one, the hall loosens into rest. The steward leaves for his chamber. The nephew takes the lamp and vanishes through a side door. The spinning woman curls near the hearth beneath a wool blanket, her covered distaff beside her like a sleeping bird. You stretch out on a straw pallet against the wall. The rushes smell faintly green where they have not yet taken smoke. Your cloak becomes your cover, your satchel, your pillow, and the dog, after turning 3 solemn circles, settles near your feet with the heavy sigh of a creature who has solved Rome by ignoring it. The last candle burns lower. The scholar sits a little longer, watching the flame. Then he pinches it out between dampened fingers. Darkness does not fall. It settles, slowly and kindly, into corners already prepared for it. And now the journey softens. The bells are far away now, no longer calling you onward, no longer counting duties, markets, courts, or cold miles of road. They fade into the deep folds of night, where each sound becomes rounder and slower, where rain on the roof is only rain, and the wind against the shutters is only wind. You do not need to walk any farther. You do not need to answer the old Roman question tonight. The road has carried it long enough. The fire breathes under its ash. A small red glow remains, quiet as a buried ruby. The keep walls hold their shadows. Wet wool dries by degrees. The dog sleeps without worry, one paw tucked beneath its chin, guarding nothing now except the warm place it has found. The scholar's manuscript rests beside him, closed and harmless in the dark, its old ink waiting for another candle, another road, another listener. You let your hands grow still. The frayed red thread lies beside the pallet, no longer tied, no longer needed. Perhaps it has done its work. Perhaps the work was only to come loose at the right time. Outside, beyond the palisade, the fields sleep under mist. The shrine keeps its faded saint. The quarry holds black water. The market square empties beneath closed shutters, and far beyond every muddy road, Rome rests in ruins beneath the same patient night. The dangerous seat is empty now. The crowd is gone. The emperor is dust. The sand is quiet. Only the lesson remains. Softened by candle smoke and distance, sit gently in the world. Watch with care, and never let comfort make your heart too heavy to feel. So you close your eyes. The hall grows dimmer, warmer, slower. The last ember lowers its red face. The medieval night gathers you close, not as a warning now, but as a blanket, and the old stones, the wet roads, the bells, the smoke, and the forgotten Roman seats all fade together into stillness, until there is nothing left to do but rest.